His analysis skill seems weak, but he's actually going to become the most powerful. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. A young man stands on the brink of a cliff, taking responsibility for being in this predicament. After all, he's weak. As he jumps, he questions why he was born and whether there was any reason for him to be alive. Until the end, this boy feels he has accomplished nothing, achieved nothing. And now his miserable life ends. Throughout his life, he was treated like trash, and now he dies as trash. Earlier, a warrior attacked a giant rat, while a mage summoned his spell alongside the boy who had jumped off the cliff. The swordsman struck the enemy squarely with a thunderous strike, but the animal resisted and continued the fight. The swordsman demands the enchantment Jolene is casting. Then she finally completes the spell and casts a fireball at the creature, ending the battle. With victory, the man boasts that his skills are the best, while the witch claims the credit for herself, emphasizing that it was her magic that saved them. Being more humble, the guy admits they both did well, but soon takes on an angry expression to tell the third member of the group to get to work, calling him a trash picker. The young man corrects that his name is Ian, but he trips and is scolded as useless by the leader. Jolene asks Zoid to have pity on the boy, as he is not from the high common class like the two fighters on the team, but from the low common class. Ian apologizes and argues that his backpack is too heavy, but Zoid does not care and orders the kid to assess the giant rat immediately, as that's all he knows how to do. While doing his job, Ian reflects that his occupation is that of a low common class appraiser. At birth, the goddess of light grants each being an occupation, while the goddess of darkness grants skills. By training these skills, you can gain a myriad of abilities, but occupations are passed down from generation to generation and can never be changed. These occupations are divided into 3 levels: low common, high common, and rare. The highest class has few people, like rich merchants and military strategists. In the second highest, there are people like Zoid and Jolene, mages and knights made for fighting. Lastly, at the lowest level, are peasants and appraisers who are not made for battle. As occupations are inherited, usually, children continue in the same profession as their parents, but having lost his parents early, Ian was unable to continue the family business. For this reason, the young man took another path open to common classes and became an adventurer, dreaming of becoming rich. However, we don't always get what we want. Using his appraisal skill, Ian notes that the giant rat has an F rarity rating, the lowest rank, but its incisors are of rank D. The problem is that the boy cannot pull out the fangs by brute force. Zoid complains that the kid is taking too long, so Ian asks for help to pry open the rat's mouth. Zoid is offended by this request, as you would never touch such a filthy creature, and Jolene adds that this is a job for a trash picker. Losing patience, the swordsman throws a rock at the boy's head and kicks him in the face. Jolene still says that the two of them take risks to keep Ian safe, while he just stands there, distracted instead of showing gratitude. At this, although he has been assaulted, Ian apologizes for his behavior. After all, he knows that deep down the world is not a fair place. So the young man continues his work and opens the rat's mouth with difficulty, while his teammates laugh at the disgust of assuming such a role. Zoid emphasizes that being an appraiser must be horrible, since all you have to do is take the rat's corpse to the guild where they can assess the animal with magical tools. About this, Ian agrees they are right, since the only thing he knows how to do is find and extract materials from monsters. In other words, deep down, he really is just a trash picker. Then Zoid goes further, saying they did the picker a favor by letting him join the group, but only because they don't want to put any disgusting corpses in their magical bag. That said, the two fighters continue on their way and tell Ian to finish the job quickly. Alone, the boy's mouth trembles with sadness and anger, but the only thing he can do is endure. When the group continues on their way, they luckily find the corpse of a hellhound. At the moment, Zoid orders the trash picker to search the body, but Ian points out that this is a bit strange since, according to guild information, this type of monster shouldn't be in this dungeon. Zoid doesn't want to hear any nonsense and kicks the boy onto the corpse, while Jolene celebrates that the materials from the hellhound are worth a lot. In the warrior's opinion, this calls for a drink after the expedition. Then, when they reach the inn, there might be some flirting with the mage. For his part, Ian assesses that the hellhound is a rarity of rank B. Zoid observes, amid 2 paths ahead, that there is another corpse of the same monster on the right path. Then Ian's eyes are filled with dread, as surely something is not right, since the map says there is only one way. Tired of the picker's tantrum, the leader of the group threatens to fire Ian if he refuses to proceed. Ian realizes that few groups would accept someone with his useless occupation, so he decides to continue with his current team. As the group progresses, they find several dead hellhounds, and Zoid thinks this is a treasure mountain. Ian expresses his concern again, as if an adventurer had killed all these dogs, they would have collected the materials. The leader tells the picker to shut up, but suddenly, a pack of hellhounds appears in front of them. Knowing they cannot deal with so many enemies, the humans think of a way to escape. Then Zoid has the idea of paralyzing Ian and leaving him as bait. The mage agrees with the plan, and when the boy is prevented from moving, the rest of the team runs away and leaves him to death. With that, the dogs lunged at the boy and tore him apart with their bites. The pain was so intense that it overcame the paralysis, so Ian seized the moment to hit 2 dogs with a stone. Then he threw all the food from his backpack to distract the monsters and fled as fast as he could, although his wounds were so deep that they prevented him from running. To make matters worse, his teammates had blocked the exit. Ian found another path, but it led straight to a cliff. At that moment, Ian pondered the worst way to die, being devoured alive by hellhounds or jumping into a pit without even knowing its depth. Ironically, at the end of his life, the boy reflected that he had spent his journey bowing to vile people like Jolene and Zoid, only to end up abandoned and without any useful skills to defend himself. Regardless, the young man blamed himself for being weak and leaped. Sometime later, a sort of apparition in the form of a woman approached Ian's bloody forehead and kissed it. Gradually, the human opened his eyes and wondered if he was dreaming as he saw the female figure before him. Then, when he closed and opened his eyes again, he realized he was standing before a gigantic tree, and his wounds had all healed. Around him, an endless waterfall encircled the area. Ian examined the water and realized it was the droplet of the world tree, capable of instantly healing diseases and wounds. Upon examining the tree, he discovered it was the world tree itself, capable of producing infinite mana and living without sunlight. Ian was awestruck, for he thought this was merely a legend. Long ago, this world had only one world tree. To produce the magical energy used in daily life, beings breathe mana from the air produced by this tree and convert it within their bodies. However, it is said that the tree had dried up and no longer existed. The fact that mana was still being produced raised many questions. Scholars believe there are other world trees in different places, but none have ever been found. Remembering this story, Ian touched the tree and thanked it for saving him. Then he heard a female voice, but seeing no one around, he assumed it was his imagination. The boy felt no presence of monsters in this place, which was strangely quiet for a dungeon, and wondered what to do next. Obviously, Zoid and Jolene weren't going to send anyone to rescue their trash picker, and there was no food in this place. Therefore, before dying of hunger, Ian had to risk trying to find the only exit he could see. Thus, he bid farewell to the tree and walked towards the only path. As he turned around, the mysterious figure appeared again, but did not express itself, although it seemed to wish to. As Ian walked down the strange path, he reflected that this was a territory unknown even to his own guild, and that there might be monsters worse than the Hellhounds. Yet despite the fear, he gathered courage and moved forward, for the time of setting limits on himself was over. From now on, Ian wanted to carve his own destiny. With that in mind, he picked up a stone from the ground to defend himself and continued walking. After some time, though he expected some monsters, so far he saw nothing unusual. Obviously, Ian felt relieved and imagined he could find an exit at any moment, but suddenly, a blade passed at unbelievable speed and cut the boy's ear. In agony, he fell to his knees and reached out to grab his ear, but some fingers were ripped off by the same weapon. Soon Asahi came into view. Ian assessed the bearer of the blade and discovered it was a gremlin, a small rank as demon with incomparable speed. Without mercy, the gremlin delivered a series of blows that mutilated Ian. Unable to move due to his injuries, the boy realized that assessing the enemy's abilities did not mean he could confront it. One way or another, the gremlin positioned itself behind the human and raised its scythe to deliver the final blow. Ian clenched his eyes shut and waited for the end, but it was taking too long, so he opened his eyes and noticed that the monster had been paralyzed and then crushed by an even larger one. The giant was a death bear, a creature also of rank S. Overcome with terror, Ian could not move in the face of such a massive threat. At that moment, the bear swiped at the human's face with its claws and destroyed the boy, one of the claws tearing his eye. Ian screamed in despair from the pain and the horrific bleeding, but the torture was not yet over. Next, the death bear grabbed the protagonist and crushed him with its brutal strength, leaving the victim nearly lifeless. When the monster opened its mouth and roared, Ian knew it was the end. Then, a massive amount of blood sprayed through the labyrinth, but it was not from Ian, but from the bear. In the background, a mysterious creature complained that it had been ordered to save a mere human. Sometime later, Ian woke up in front of the world tree again, and his injuries had disappeared. Before him, a beautiful girl, as if from a fairy tale, held a cup of tea. Without saying a word, she smiled at the boy. Unsure how to react, Ian's eyes trembled with admiration as the creature who had rescued him, claiming to be the girl's mother, stated that her daughter had gone to the trouble of preparing this tea for him, so he better drink it like he's never drunk anything in his life. Filled with embarrassment, the girl offered the tea to the boy, but since he was still somewhat stiff, the mother grabbed the cup and poured the liquid down the poor boy's throat. Even so, Ein declared his love for the drink, and the blonde girl was so delighted that her ears twitched. Overwhelmed by the moment, Ein blurted out that she was beautiful, prompting the mother to warn that things would heat up if the human thought anything indecent about her daughter. Thus, Ein dialed it back and asked if it was these two who had saved him, and the white-haired one said that Yuri had pleaded for them to save the boy. Yuri denied doing anything, but the mother clarified that if it weren't for her insistence, this kid would have been dead. In turn, Ein humbly thanked them, causing the girl's little ears to flutter once again. Seeing this, the mother drop-kicked the youngster in the face and ordered him to address her daughter more formally. Yuri told her mother that she preferred to be called by her first name, and only then did Ein realize that the two treated each other as mother and daughter, so he asked if they really were related. The girl with the glasses confirmed they were, or something close to it, at least. She introduced herself as Ursula, the guardian of the world tree. According to her, this world contained 9 such trees, and the guardians were responsible for keeping them healthy and safe from threats. Since Yuri had rooted herself in this place, Ursula had lived at the base of it. Ein found it strange that the girl acted as if Yuri was a tree, but she insisted that was exactly what the girl was. In fact, Yuri was the spirit of this world tree. Reflecting on this, Ein remarked it was no wonder the lady was so beautiful, prompting Ursula to again assault him mercilessly for his brazen audacity, stating she had returned the boy's eye for him to use it that way. By the way, Ein remembered that a death bear had torn his eye out, but now it was completely healed. Ursula explained that she had healed him with drops from the world tree, but since it wasn't possible to reconstruct the human's eyeball, she used a piece of the tree to create an artificial spiritual eye for him at Yuri's request. Since Yuri had requested all these things, Ein wondered why, and she recalled that the boy, after being saved, had personally thanked the tree, which touched her heart. After all, according to Ursula, it was rare for someone to fall into this abyss, but Yuri always wanted to save everyone who did. However, no one had ever uttered a word of gratitude. On the contrary, when they discovered it was the world tree, people would tear off branches and leaves to take away. That's why Yuri was pleased to hear Ein's words. Thus, the boy took the opportunity to thank her for being saved twice and said he owed his life to her. This time, the girl not only twitched her ear, but also her entire body with embarrassment. Fed up with this awkward atmosphere, Ursula told the lad to beat it, as he had been saved and there was nothing more to do there. However, Yuri was sure he would die if he tried to return alone and asked the guardian to do something. The protector argued that her oath only allowed her to stay within a certain distance from the world tree, and teleportation spells didn't work in this place, so there was no way out. Hearing this, Yuri began to cry, so Ursula softened her heart and committed to training Ein so that he would be strong enough to leave there on his own. Touched by this opportunity, the boy hugged the two mysterious creatures enthusiastically. After pushing the presumptuous boy away, Ursula made it clear that he would be trained by the greatest sage there was, meaning no pathetic efforts would be accepted. In turn, Ein promised to give his all. Without delay, she took the new pupil to learn some tricks. He was worried she might just throw him at a monster without him knowing how to wield a sword, but the guardian explained that the traditional method, with all its theory, would take too long, and they didn't have time for that. In other words, Ein would be trained more in practice than anything else. With that, she told him to look down the corridor, but he couldn't see anything because of the darkness. The master taught that now he had a spiritual eye, and it was far from being an ordinary organ like those of humans. The secret was for the boy to be aware of this. Once he did, things would change. Focusing on this teaching, Ein remembered that his left eye had been destroyed by the bear, plunging him into darkness. However, Yuri had given light to him, and everything he would see in this world from now on was blessed by that woman behind it. With this in mind, he felt his spiritual eye warm up, and when he opened it, he could clearly see the entire corridor. With that, Ursula began the real training, summoning a gremlin for the apprentice. Immediately, the monster began to circle around its unreachable speed, leaving Ein terrified. According to Ursula, he had to dodge all of the opponent's movements. The boy was sure he couldn't, but the master reminded him that he possessed the power of assessment. In the student's mind, this ability only served to check statuses and such, but as the teacher had already said, the spiritual eye changed the meaning of absolutely everything the human mastered, and this technique was no exception. Thus, he used assessment on the gremlin, and the panel read that the monster would cut his right ear at high speed. Although he could read it, the boy even celebrated, but the gremlin did exactly what was written on the panel, leaving Ein lying on the ground in pain. To prevent her pupil from dying, Ursula isolated the two with a magical shield and threw some drops from the world tree to completely heal his wound, reattaching his severed ear to his head. Because of this water, Ein could rest easy and literally kill himself training, because even if he died, he wouldn't really die. So the apprentice returns to practice and repeats the procedure from the first time, reading the enemy's movements, but he can't react to an attack from this creature with his current reflexes. According to his master, the answer always lies in the spiritual eye, so Ein focuses on this device in search of an answer. Thinking beyond human imagination, he manages to launch the reevaluate skill, which this time not only predicts where the opponent will strike, but also when. In this instance, the gremlin is going to slice his left leg in 5 seconds, so he counts down in his head and leaps to the side, successfully evading the assault. As it's the first time he has dodged a monster, especially in S-Rank 1, Ein gets distracted again to tell his teacher, but ends up receiving a well-placed scythe hit on his back. Ursula mocks him for letting his guard down so soon, and the pupil acknowledges the slip-up and understands that he needs to use evaluation as naturally as breathing, as that's the only way he could face such a strong monster. When he manages to do that, the protagonist feels that his whole world will turn upside down. After that, the training continues and the boy rapidly improves his dodging to the point where he can evade multiple strikes. At one point, he gets distracted and takes another scythe hit, but Ursula decides to move on to the next training session. From now on, Ein must defeat the gremlin. The boy complains about not having a weapon, so the master hands him a wooden sword made from the world tree at Yuri's request. Knowing this, Ein thanks the spirit that saved him again and faces the challenge. As he stands before the gremlin, he repeats the entire process he has memorized up to that moment, but aware that now he needs to strike at the right time before getting hit. So he counts the 5 seconds indicated by evaluation, but the monster dodges. Impatient, Ein asks what he should do, but Ursula is also fed up and tells the kid to figure it out on his own. With no other choice, Ein tries to hold the sword exactly where the gremlin will strike, to save time handling the weapon, but this strategy also fails. Realizing this, Ein analyzes that this monster also thinks before acting and will dodge if it sees a sword in front of it. Obviously, spirits and humans don't see things the same way. With this in mind, the protagonist focuses his spiritual eye and manages to launch super evaluation, which makes time around him extremely slow. With this advantage, he gets the gremlin's head hard and defeats a monster for the first time in his life, so he openly celebrates. However, Ursula slaps the student and warns that it's too early to celebrate because now comes a more difficult part. Indeed, Ein's next step will be to defeat the dozens of gremlins scattered throughout the tunnel. In sequence, the apprentice had already handled the task without much difficulty, but Ursula couldn't expect anything less from someone who possesses a spiritual eye. Either way, it's time for the next step. The apprentice must evaluate a gremlin's ability and steal that technique for himself. Ein argues that he can only evaluate, not steal powers, but the master thinks he's talking like an amateur, as the evaluation skill was always about understanding the enemy's power and taking it for himself, especially with that left eye. Thus, Ein evaluates a gremlin and feels a terrible headache, as if the monster's ability had forcibly entered his skull. Next, he tests his speed and is surprised to discover what he is capable of doing now, but his body can't handle the speed and his muscles tear after the first sprint. After healing the boy, Ursula says this is normal, and that muscles get stronger each time they tear. That means Ein must insist on running until his body toughens up. Taking this teaching as a foundation, Ein trains diligently until his body reaches a new level, to the point where he thinks he's ready to take down a death bear. However, Ursula thinks the kid is getting too cocky too soon, which makes him bow his head and regret not having that capability. Feeling sorry for her student, the teacher lets him analyze her ability. Happy and curious, the boy asks what her power is, so the woman throws a fireball at him. After that, she explains that she used fireball with discard enchantment, which is the technique that allows the user to summon spells without having to recite the enchantment. After the apprentice recovers from the spell he suffered, the master casts another one just like it, so he quickly performs the evaluation and feels the reaction in his body besides the spell that sets his body on fire again. Still, as he only managed to seal a discard enchantment, Ursula throws more fire at him to make him learn this technique as well. 5 days later, after intensely training his new skills, Ein frequently faints due to his low magical capacity. When he runs out of mana, Yuri uses drops from the world tree for him to recover and increase his capacity, but to have this increase, he needs to exhaust all his reserve first. 15 days later, Ein was capable of firing 1,000 fireballs at once, along with other medium-level spells like Windstorm. Reviewing her pupil at this level, Ursula announces that it's time for a rematch. Soon, Ein is taken to a death bear and starts sweating profusely from nervousness, but the master assures him that all he has to do is repeat what he does in training and kicks him towards the beast. Remembering how he was left to die in a cave, Ein recognizes that he has changed, and this gives him the courage to launch several fireballs, but he manages to miss all due to nervousness, though at least this creates a smokescreen. Using this to his advantage, the boy uses super speed and super evaluation to make everything very slow around him. Then he hits the bear squarely with the windstorm, but the animal comes back to the fight enraged. This time, the human concentrates and launches the 100 fireballs at the target, and this barrage was enough to bring down the death bear. After doing this, Ain even considers that the bear was always weak, but rethinks and concludes that, in fact, he has become strong. Then he takes on the bear's abilities, which include superhuman strength and steel cutter. Ursula hopes that with these new skills, the young man will gain a bit more confidence. Finally, all that's left is for her to defeat the monsters while Ain makes his way to the surface. In other words, his training is complete. On their return to the World Tree, the Master sadly informs him that she has a gift Yuri sent for the boy. It's the remainder of the World Tree's spirit core, which Ursula will use to make a new artificial eye for Ain. The boy doesn't want to accept the gift since Yuri has already shared part of her power with him. So Ursula explains impatiently that it's just a power loan as there's a spell that returns the core to the tree after the human dies. With this in mind, Ain accepts the offer. Then the teacher performs the magical procedure and notifies that the eye of the spirit god will develop over time. Surprised to hear that it's the eye of a god, Ain looks around and can't find Yuri, until she suddenly appears right in front of him. He asks how she appeared out of nowhere, and she explains that she came from within his eye. Ursula adds that with the entire spirit core transplanted into Ain's eye, he becomes essentially the same as the World Tree. Moreover, it means that Yuri herself can reside within the boy's eye. By the way, the Master demands that the boy be very happy to have such a privilege, while Yuri tries to convince the human that she can be very useful, since she can heal him whenever necessary. Ain likes what he hears, but asks Ursula what she thinks about it. In response, Ursula delivers a flying kick to the guy's face, followed by a spin kick to his back, while explaining that her dream was never to entrust her daughter to just any deadbeat. Since that's the case, Ain asks why she agreed to do this. Then, she reveals that Yuri has only had her since birth, never had a friend, and always felt lonely. That's why she allowed the transfusion, because Ain might be a complete idiot, but he has a good heart and will show the world to Yuri with that eye. With that said, Ursula gives, as a parting gift, a magical mark on the boy's hand, which holds the spell Infinite Storage. He just needs to wish and he can store whatever he wants inside that emblem. To start, she passes him a spiritual sword to store, but before that, she stabs the poor guy's eye with the blade. Then, as he rolls on the ground in pain, the teacher announces that she will also give a Philosopher's Stone to the student. She shoves the stone down the boy's throat, and this makes his right eye shine. Ain asks what's going on, and she tells him that she has established a permanent bond between the eye and her consciousness. From now on, she can see everything Ain sees, so it's good for him not to get too friendly with Yuri. After all this, Ain feels ready to return to the surface, and he asks if there is anything Yuri would like to do up there, because he wants to repay everything she did for him. Without hesitation, the woman says she would like to see her family. Then Ursula takes the opportunity to explain that originally the World Tree was a single huge tree, but its branches and spirit core were divided into 9 parts and hidden in dungeons across various regions. With that in mind, Ain extends his hand to Yuri and announces that the two will travel the world and seek her family. Embarrassed, the girl asks if this won't be troublesome, but he assures her it won't, especially since he also wants to meet her family. With that said, a spiritual being bursts into tears, while Ursula herself cracks a smile, this time at the interaction between the two. Finally, the human continues his journey towards the surface until he is unsure whether to take the left or right path at a certain point. Suddenly, Ursula's voice tells him to take the left as she has assessed an escape route for him, and he just needs to follow the arrows she just drew. Besides that, there's an enemy approaching, a viper with anything but mild venom. Ain asks if the Eye of the Spirit God can evaluate all this, and the Master confirms it can. Sometime later, with the snake decapitated at his feet, Ain ponders that he is now capable of killing even S-rank enemies with ease. Ursula tells the guy to stop boasting and to quickly steal the creature's abilities. In the midst of this process, she mentions that he will gain resistance to status effects and solvent venom. Used to feeling excruciating pain every time he takes techniques from a dead enemy, Ain already grips his head tightly and braces for what's to come. But to his surprise, no pain arrives. Yuri appears at the same moment to tell him that she healed the boy immediately, which means he will never again suffer those pains. Overjoyed, Ain makes it a point to say that he is grateful for having met Yuri, and these sweet words leave the girl in a state of emotional combustion. Later, Ain encounters a huge and threatening door, which he will have to cross by any means if he wants to reach the surface. At this point, Ursula explains that each dungeon has a monster they call the boss, and that each dungeon is like a living being that consumes people, and a living being has a heart, which can be called the core of the labyrinth. Of course, the dungeons cannot allow their hearts to be destroyed easily, and that's why they place the strongest creatures to protect it. Hearing this, Ain reflects that Yuri and Ursula have become strong enough to defeat S-rank monsters, but even these strong monsters should not be compared to the bosses. Thinking about this, the boy begins to tremble. Then Yuri appears, holds his fist, and assures him that everything will be okay. With this in mind, Aim reflects that he is no longer the guy who runs away desperately, scavenging trash while waiting for death. Now he is an evaluator who has received the divine blessing of the World Tree. Keeping this in mind, he opens the door and faces the heart of the dungeon, the core of the labyrinth. At that moment, a huge circle of invocation appears on the ground before him and Yuri. After the invocation process, a gigantic and menacing creature emerges. Ain asks Yuri to enter his eye, while the boy advances towards the boss with the conviction that he will win. At the same time, Ursula offers tips on how to defeat a creature of that size. Due to the size difference, she suggests getting close first, which the human does. Then she warns that the human will take a hit in 2 seconds, so Ain braces himself, using his superhuman strength to stiffen his arms and absorb the monstrous punch's surreal damage. Obviously, the impact was too great for a calm defense, and Ain nearly buckles under the pressure of such force. In the nick of time, Yuri rushes to heal the boy. Meanwhile, Ain reflects that his former self would have been quaking in fear by now. But he's no longer that person. Activating the dissolving venom on the monster's hand, he melts it completely. Enraged, the monster uses its left hand to repeatedly attack, but Ain narrowly escapes death, though he knows he won't win this fight easily. Realizing this, Ursula sees that things aren't going well and allows the use of the maximum level magic she taught him, since he has enough mana to cast this supreme spell at least once. With that, Ain begins casting the skill, and after a few seconds, unleashes the Nova Strike against his target, causing a devastating explosion in the boss room. As the dust settles, a crater is left in the floor with the monster reduced to dust inside it. Ain wonders if he has won, unable to believe it was possible, while Yuri appears to say that was truly incredible. Despite what he had done, Ain acknowledges to himself that he could never have won without his friend's help. Thus, he holds Yuri's hand and says it was all thanks to her. Quickly, Ursula intervenes and sends the boy to check the golem. Upon doing so, he gains various abilities like Gravity Well and Immovable Fortress, but the teacher draws his attention to the core. Appearing beside the human, she explains that his left eye is now essentially the World Tree, so she can teleport to him whenever she wants. With that, she notes that this labyrinth core is similar to the spiritual core, meaning Ursula can further enhance the pupil's eye with this item. Thus, she absorbs the core and transfers his power to Ain, evolving his spiritual eye to level 2. After leaving the boss room, the door closes, making Ain wonder if they can no longer return. Ursula explains that the loss of the dungeon's core closed the route to the World Tree, and even the hole where Ain fell has been sealed. In other words, no one else can reach the World Tree now. Knowing this, the trio continues their journey to the surface. Meanwhile, in the city, Zoid, the leader of Ain's former group, drinks alongside 2 companions and pretends to be saddened by Ain's death to the hellhounds of that dungeon. According to him, the boy sacrificed himself for the rest of the team. Another man asks why a garbage picker would do that, prompting Zoid to feign an outburst and scold the man for not calling him that because Ain was a brave guy who died protecting his friends. Internally, Zoid laughs about the situation, especially since the only person who knows the truth is dead and can't tell anyone else. He continues his dramatic act in front of his friends until Ian appears behind him and asks who died. Zoid spits out his drink in shock and asks how the kid escaped death, to which he replies that he defeated the dogs. Zoid grabs the former companion and asserts that he could never have killed those monsters, while one of the friends asks why he isn't happy, since the one who saved his life returned alive. At that moment, Ain corrects them by revealing that Zoid and Jolene paralyzed him and left him as bait for the hellhounds. Hearing this, everyone in the tavern turns against the adventurer's wicked action and assaults the man in every way, until Ain himself protects the former leader, arguing that what matters is that he's still alive. Internally, Ain reflects that despite everything, Zoid was the only one who accepted him into a group, since Ain had always been a useless outcast, and it was because of that abandonment he suffered that he met Yuri and Ursula. Thus, the protagonist approaches his former companion and thanks him for everything. With that, everyone around is stunned by the attitude of the man who was left to die, to the point of thinking that Ain is not the same person. Days later, the boy gains new abilities after defeating the boss of a dungeon near the capital and evolves his eye again, now able to read anything written. On the way back, he regrets not finding any World Tree, although he knows it will be very difficult to find one. Amidst this, the group hears a carriage being attacked ahead, so they rush to help and eliminate all the enemies attacking the humans. After saving the people, Ain approaches to check if everything is okay, and a surviving girl looks at the boy's face and falls in love, hugging him tightly and calling him a hero. The man beside her introduces himself as Jasper, head of a commercial company, and informs that the woman is Claudia von Gaden Miga, the third princess of this kingdom. Afterwards, the princess gathers her rescuers at her mansion to thank them, and also takes another opportunity to hug the hero, but this time Yuri steps in to prevent it. On impulse, she justifies that she did it because she is Ein's wife. So Claudia responds that there's no problem, she can just become the second wife. To further scramble in the protagonist's mind, Jasper also offers to marry him, emphasizing that he is the head of a guild called Gino Company. As he leads all the guests to a place, Ein comments that the products of this company are everywhere. Soon, they arrive in a room filled with precious jewels, and Jasper states that his mission is to protect all the jewels of the world to preserve their shine forever. Moreover, the man notices that Ein's left eye is spiritual and asks if he has heard the legends about it. A long time ago, the World Tree was on the surface. To seal Micturian, the demon lord of calamity who tried to destroy the World Tree used all its power and eventually withered, leaving behind its spiritual cores. Incidentally, Jasper had been looking for one of these cores for a long time, and suddenly, Ein appeared in his life. Because of this, he wishes to marry the boy. Ein was ready to refuse, but Ursula pulls him aside and reminds him that this guy has information about the Tree of Life, not to mention endless wealth. Setting aside that crude opinion, Ein offers only his friendship to Jasper, but accepts it readily, at least for now. Moreover, the businessman invites the adventurer to live in his mansion, mentioning that one day it will be the home of his new husband. Trying to keep the conversation serious, Ein says he can obtain the spiritual core and asks for clues on where to find it. Hey guys, the source will be in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos. See you.